Welcome to Cool Explorations.
Remember, guys, if you like these videos, just hit that little like button and subscribe to there so you don't miss any of the future videos. Canada, home to a diverse melting pot of cultures and races from all over the world. We pride ourselves in tolerance and accepting. Do we really, though? We accept immigrants and refugees, sure. And yes, we do accept them with welcome arms. But what about those who have lived in Canada their whole lives? I assure you it is not a culture of acceptance for those who have lived here most or all of their lives. We are cast aside and pressured into silence by a government with eyes set on destroying our cultures and traditions, and replacing them with the cultures of those newly arriving in Canada. This needs serious thought, and changes need to be made, as this actually is a very serious matter. One way that this is affecting Canadians is by pushing certain companies to hire immigrants. Tim Hortons has been pointed out for this very thing. They bring in immigrants, Filipino employees in particular, rather than hiring white Canadians. And they sometimes only hire Filipinos. This is supposed to be so that it is easier for the employees to communicate amongst each other. The problem is then that they should be speaking English or French at work, depending on the area, as these are our official languages, which would solve the communication problem, as they are supposed to be fluent in English or French to be allowed entry, but sadly this is not the norm. Also, please note, when going to Tim Hortons, you rarely ever get what you actually ordered. McDonald's has been accused of the exact same practices. I know of a few local businesses, a bank, hotel, coffee shops that do exactly this same thing. They hire mainly Filipino employees. And then one could take a look at the trucking industry, for example, which has begun to only hire Arab or East Indian employees to drive their trucks, rather than people who have been in the country their whole lives, as it is cheaper for them. The problem is that they often do not go through the proper training and have caused accidents and fatalities as a result. We can look at the Humboldt Broncos bus crash for an example. It is sad when the number of employed immigrants is on the rise, and yet Alberta has seen so many citizens who are born here losing jobs at a high rate, leading to suicides, yet nothing is being done about this problem. It is simply ignored by our government. Another problem comes in the form of reserving job positions based upon both race and gender. The same can also be said for colleges and universities. In certain situations, hiring based upon race, religion, or gender is justified and necessary. But there are cases where this is not, and these cases must be proven to be the requirement. In all other cases, hiring based upon this is not legal in terms of your job practices. These hiring decisions are usually an image factor. They hire women or natives or an immigrant for appearance of being diverse and inclusive. These positions should be reserved for the most qualified applicant. Jobs should always be given on merit. Who deserves the position most? If it happens to be a woman, great. If it is a native, great. But it should always be the most qualified person. The same should be said about schools. Schools are reserving spots for women specifically, which women do need a chance, but so do men. Why should men not get into a school if they are more qualified just because a woman has a spot reserved based upon her gender? They do the same for our native population or other races. I can understand that they are trying to get natives more education. I understand what they're trying to accomplish here in doing this, as it has been a struggle for our Indigenous population to gain education and be motivated to finish. The problem comes in the form of then other more qualified people may be missed. School entries should be based upon who deserves the spot most. Otherwise, a student can lack motivation. Many Indigenous in schools would be deserving and qualified applicant. And if so, then they should get the spot. The same could be said with paying federal tax dollars to these people to go to school. As when I was in school, we had a few students who only showed up for the minimum amount of classes so that they could grab the money. Motivation just wasn't there, and they were not allowed to be removed from the class. Yet there was a 2-year waiting period for myself to enter the course. It is a controversial issue with no clear solution, because we do need Indigenous people to be in school and succeed in life. There needs to be a better way of motivating and encouraging our wonderful Indigenous population. We need them, and we need them to succeed. Another big issue in Canada is in relation to Quebec, or French speakers. In Quebec, employees must be speaking French in all forms of communication, whether vocal, written, or email, etc. Signage must also be in French. This is a real problem. English is an official language in Canada and should not be playing second fiddle to the French language. Everyone should be given a fair shake, and both languages should be allowed to be used, not suppressed by forcing a law upon them, which would put French at the forefront. Businesses in Ottawa are doing the same thing, however, this time favoring customers and clients who are French over English-speaking patrons. In Canada, we hear about people being anti-Islam and Islamophobia all the time. This is an issue in Canada for sure. People do hate Muslim people in many cases, umbrellaing them under one lump group. Not all Muslims are terrorists, and not all follow Sharia law. Those who do follow Sharia law are the problem, as they are discriminatory against women and anyone non-Muslim. Preaching that women are to be used and free to rape really drives rightful anger from people around the world, including myself. They also attack other religions and try to suppress them. They move into other countries around the world, and then they remove cultures from the country that they move to, and complain about other religions and traditions and holidays. Yet they expect people to make accommodations for them. We have the religions of Jewish and Christian institution being suppressed, restricted, and censored. Canadians openly attack and insult these religions and others, and nothing gets said or done. Attack Islam, though, and you are asking for attacks, risk losing your job, and are going to be labeled a bigot, just like Don Cherry. This is not right. All religions deserve respect and should be treated the same. These religions should not be censored and minimalized just to bolster another religion. Another form of discrimination in Canada is the inequalities between people groups. As mentioned previously, we have covered the religious side of this, as well as the French side. Although the Indigenous people have some favoritism for them, they also have a lot of things going against them. They struggle to get by and live in poverty, the same as the Inuit population. A lot of this is policies put in place through our federal government that enables the leaders and elders to have control over everything. As a result, some of these leaders and elders have become corrupt. They siphon funds to line their own pockets, while their reserve members suffer and don't receive the money that they need to live comfortably. Even the paid education that they are supposed to receive goes to the elders and tribal leaders' families, rather than being given to the regular reserve members. This is not just me saying this either. This knowledge and fact comes from people who currently live and struggle on reserves. On top of that, these communities are left with dirty water that they can't even bathe in without boiling first. The reason behind this is the government came in and set up water treatment facilities, but did not stay to train anyone how to operate them. They relied on the tribal leaders and elders to use the money given for training to spend the money for its intended purposes. But instead, many of those leaders used the money for gambling or buying their families' things. Our Indigenous and Inuit communities deserve a new and fair deal, just like the West. The need to have control stripped from corrupt tribal hierarchy and have the power and money go straight to the population. A change in treaties is needed desperately to help these groups control their own futures. Again, the same thing that the board with Again, the same thing that the West is asking for from the federal government. Those who say that these communities are not on board with independence have spoken only to the tribal leaders, not the regular reserve member. Really, the demands of the West and demands being made by the communities are in line with each other perfectly. Corruption of their hierarchy is not the only problem, however. Often, the government takes a hands-off approach, throwing money at places that may need more of a hands-on approach. Part of their fear is a repeat of the residential school scandal, a fair worry considering how awful the residential schools were for everyone placed there, whether Indigenous, Métis, Irish, Scottish, etc. A situation that should never be repeated, but that does not mean the government should not be monitoring more closely the activities of leaders. This would not be a discriminatory act by the government. It would be a show of genuine concern for those living on reserves, a group of people that make up a large part of our population. This is much more important than many other issues that our government has promised to tackle. There is much more that could be said about these matters, more discrimination that could be discussed. This federal government is clearly not the only group to blame. Blame would come over the generations of prime ministers. Right from the day of Confederation, we focus on removing one area of discrimination, but then cause a dozen more in the process. Discrimination of white people seems to be an accepted form, something people just don't talk about, but white people have rights as well. White lives matter as much as all other lives. Every group of people is equal. Every group deserves respect and should be treated the same. Special treatment or walking on eggshells around certain people groups needs to stop. People need to focus on true equality, not equality at the cost of other groups. Show respect for everyone. Treat them all the same. Race, religion, culture, gender, beliefs, none of it matters at the end of the day. We are all human and need to learn to live together and stop trying to drive wedges that result in fighting and wars. Respect is the key to equality.
Remember to like and subscribe.